Good morning to everyone. Thank you for joining us, and thank you also for those who are joining online. It's a beautiful, very special time of the year, as we approach Diwali and all of the uh, devotion that is awakened during these special times. It's as if there's a wind of grace that comes at the time of these holy occasions. And if we can attune ourselves to God and to our inner aspirations during that time, that wind of grace that is coming from the mass consciousness of everyone, even the person who would consider themselves not at all spiritual, at this time is at least thinking about Diwali, at least thinking about maybe it's only receiving presents because his mind, her mind is clouded, thinking of oneself, but at least there's a spiritual atmosphere around it. And so, as many, many thousands, millions of people, billions of people really, are turning their consciousness during the holy season toward God, if we do that at that time, there's a kind of a group magnetism that helps us. But it's important that, especially, I'm going to ask again, please suspend mobiles. Uh, It's important, especially during this time, that those of us who are consciously and sincerely seeking God, that we really do concentrate our energies at this time in that spiritual search, because it's easy to get caught up in the outer um, busyness of the holidays. We were driving yesterday from Gurgaon to Delhi, and it was, if any of you were out driving yesterday, you know what I'm speaking about. It took us about twice as long to get from one place to the other because everybody is out shopping and running around and making visits and so on. It's very easy to get caught up in the busyness, even of something that's supposed to be holy. And so at this time, for those of us who are seeking inwardly, it's very important that we set aside some time, and the more the better, for our spiritual search, for our meditations, and also for blessings, for sending the energy that has been awakened in a devotional way and in an uplifted way, to share that with others and to send that to others, because our consciousness being aligned with the deeper aspect of this holy time will help, especially those around us that we come in contact with, will help them to also tune in more deeply. Devi and I visited about 3 weeks ago. We visited our center in the work that we have in Brindaban, and it's a very, very beautiful work. If those of you who don't know about it, they just yesterday released the website. And so I would urge you to go to yoganandatrust.org, yoganandatrust.org, and that will show you this beautiful work. But we're helping many, many thousands of widows every day with food and medical services. But more than that, we're giving them love and dignity. We're trying to act on behalf of Master and on behalf of Babaji, who was Krishna, remember? So we're trying to act on their behalf to bring love and dignity and true caring to people who have been abandoned. But I don't want to go into that very much. I just want to relate a story that It's very nice that now we're getting some of these wonderful books by Swamiji and Master translated and printed in various languages. So when Devi and I were there about 3 weeks ago, uh, we were visiting one of our care homes. We have about 280 widow mothers who now live with us in various care homes. And there was a widow mother with a walker, and she had a copy of the Essence of the Bhagavad Gita by Swamiji in Hindi, and she was reading that. And she said, I have a question though, and which was all through a translator. But she said, why did Krishna tell Arjuna that he had to fight in a war? That doesn't seem right. Why did he have to fight? And why is it? Here we have this beautiful Diwali festival that is about light, but it's also about warfare. Why did Rama have to fight against Ravana? Why did the Pandavas have to fight against the Kauravas? Why is it that there seems, in something that should be bringing us peace and harmony, why is there so much imagery of war? Is it only because in the past there were a lot of wars and it's historical? Well, in part, that's true. As Master explained in the Bhagavad Gita, what Ved Vyas did was he took the historical facts of a war that took place at that time, but he wove into it a spiritual analogy, because what the battle is really about, why does Krishna tell Arjuna he has to fight? Why does Rama demonstrate that we have to go and fight when something beautiful and precious representing purity is taken from us by the negative forces in the world? It's because it's all symbolic that the battle is an inward battle. And the light that we speak of really is an inner light. And so God tells us that if we're on the spiritual path, then we have to go to battle, not against outward forces. That's where the mistake. See, all of the whole problem of Maya, the whole difficulty that we get in is we take the inner things and we express them outwardly. And so we need to conquer our own sense of ego. And that is a very pure and very central part of the spiritual journey. And so if we understand that the battle is against our own ego, then it's spiritual. But if we project it outward and we say, we have to conquer the people at the work, I have to climb up over everyone else, I have to advance, I have to get more money, I have to go faster, I have to cut these people off when I'm driving. If we express outwardly the sense of conquering, then it becomes worldly. That is what we meant about planting more seeds of karma, because if we've done that in the past, then that tendency is going to come up. And if the right circumstances arise, then we're going to plant more seeds. The real seeds that we're planting are to take the inner search, the inner battle, and express it outwardly. So the battle against our own self, our own ego, gets expressed as battle against others. Ultimately, at the highest level, there are no others. Everybody that you are upset with, everybody that you have difficulty with, is ultimately an expression of your own self. That's why you have difficulty with them. As Swami Kriyananda said to us, if you have just finished smoking, you've had a long habit of smoking, finally you've been able to overcome that habit. When you see somebody smoking, you're upset with that person, aren't you? You're a little angry with them. About 15 years later, you've stopped smoking, you don't have any residual tendency. You can see somebody smoke, you know that it's incorrect, you know that it's wrong, but it doesn't make you angry. And so because you're still trying to overcome that within yourself, when you see somebody acting in a way that you don't want to act, you get upset, you get mad at them. And so that's one of the darknesses that we're trying to overcome within ourselves, is the tendency to be upset with somebody else and then to battle against them. And so it happens, there are many, many ways that this can happen. It can happen at work um, when we're trying to uh, overcome some obstacle and we're angry all the time, and we're pushing, and there's it creates a lot of disharmony. Very often it can happen within a family where somebody does something and we're upset with that person and then we reject them. I once read of a story of a family where there were two brothers, and one of them had done something that upset the other brother. And so the one brother that was upset said, "I'm not going to talk with you again." And that mood lasted for about a week. But because he had said that, he didn't want to call his brother. And because the brother had been told that the other one didn't want to talk with him, he didn't want to call the brother either. So after a week, they were ready to be friends again. But this went on for years and years and years. And finally, it was about 15 years later when someone said, "You know, could whoever's phone is going off do something about it?" So so somebody mentioned that your brother really would like to speak with you. "Oh no, he's still mad at me." "No, no, he was done being mad at you 15 years ago. He wants to talk." And so they got together and they made peace, and they made up again. So these little things, see, these are the battles that we have within ourselves. These are the difficulties for which we have to bring light into us. What it really takes to, here this morning we lit the light, and we had the help of camphor, which is another spiritual analogy. If we want to see light at the forehead in the spiritual eye, we have to have something that helps us get that fire started. And that something is devotion, or it's our spiritual practices. For us, it might be Hong Sa, or it might be Kriya, or one of the spiritual practices. But we have to have something that really, what's happening when you have fire, you're increasing the heat, and that produces light. We have to increase not the physical heat, but we have to increase the rate of vibration of our consciousness. And as we increase the rate of vibration of our consciousness, then light begins to appear inside. And so what we want to do is we want to undertake the spiritual practices, which to a certain extent is what Krishna and the Ramayana were about. The spiritual practices are the way that we battle against the darkness or the dark tendencies within ourselves. And so we want to begin to fight that battle. And as we fight that battle, as we use these techniques, as we offer up the tendencies, as we offer up greed or jealousy or resentment or whatever the tendency is that's holding us back, might be fear or anxiety, could be any of many, many different tendencies. As we offer those up more and more willingly, then they become fuel for the fire, that they become something that makes the consciousness brighter and brighter. I had the great blessing to have the chance to meet with Ananda Ma. And we brought a lot of beads and medallions and different things from people from Ananda. And we offered those to her and asked her, will you bless them? And she said, why do you want this body to bless them? Can't you see that God's blessings are always shining down? And we said, yes, Ma, we see that, but could you still bless them? And she kind of laughed and did a little blessing for them. But she used the analogy, and also Swamiji often used the analogy, that God's blessings are like light shining on a building. It's always shining there. But if we have the shutters closed, that light won't come into the dark room of our consciousness. So our job is not to create the light. That's already created. Our job is to open the shutters. And then the light will come in automatically in and of itself. And so that's what our spiritual practices are. So we don't create the light, but we have to welcome the light, because the light will be blocked if we turn away from it. If the light is coming in that direction and I turn in this, well, the altar is there, so bad analogy, but you understand. If you turn away from the light, then you don't see the light. If you turn partly toward it, you see it some. If you look at it full, it will bathe you. And when you do that, that light will come in and it will change your consciousness. And so during this beautiful holy time of Diwali, the festival of light, it's our job to turn more completely toward the light and let that come in, and it will come into all the nooks and crannies of our consciousness. Master, I'll just end with this. Don't think of yourself ever as a sinner. Don't think, oh, that light can never change me. I've done so many dark things, or I've had this tendency, I've held on to it so for such a long time, I can't ever change it. Master said that you can have a room that has been in darkness for 1,000,000 years, and as soon as you bring a candle into that room, the darkness vanishes just like that. And so no matter what you think you may have done or that you can't overcome, if you allow God's light to come in, it will change you very quickly.
Good morning again. Before we came into the satsang room, we were having a little tea in the smaller room. And there's a beautiful picture of Swami Kriyananda, who was our teacher for 45 years plus. And we were just remembering when that picture was taken. Jyotish took it. And it was right when Ananda Swami first came to India in the fall of 2003. And we needed a picture for a lecture Swami was giving. And so he pronamed and Jyotish took the picture. But we were speaking as we looked at that picture, how happy Swamiji looked, because it had been his lifelong dream to come to India, to bring Master's teachings back here. And finally, at that point in his life, he was in his mid-70s, not in good health, but he was able to come and establish Ananda Sangha here in India. And then yesterday in Gorgon, we had a beautiful ceremony for a certificate ceremony for all the people who have completed the meditation teacher training course, both beginning and advanced, and everyone was given a certificate. And there were maybe about 30 people, both from Gorgon and Noida. Many here from Noida came. And it was so touching to us because we knew that this was really the true fulfillment of Swami's dream, was to have all of you take up Master's teachings and begin sharing them with others. But we were reminded of when the mobiles were going off, it reminded me, and I hope no one feels bad about that. It happens. We all forget to turn them off. But we were reminded of one of Swami's first talks when he was up there, and it was a big group of people. He was giving a lecture, and a mobile went off. He kept talking, and then he said, would you please turn that mobile off? And it kept ringing and ringing. And he stopped and he said, I've asked you twice now. Can't you please turn that mobile off? Kept ringing and ringing. And then finally Swamiji stopped and he realized it was his mobile in his pocket. And someone luckily just got a picture of him. He was laughing so hard and he reached in and it was a call from America. They didn't know the time difference. Anyway, I think he was doing that to help us never be critical of anybody whose mobile goes off. But to being Diwali, we want to talk about, and our theme for today is the inner light. There are, one might say, two kinds of light that we're familiar with. The first is the light of the world, the light of the sun, the light of electricity. But this light comes and goes, doesn't it? The sun shines in the day, but then it goes below the horizon. That light is gone. We turn on the light, but maybe the power goes off and that light is gone. And so the light of the world is not something we can depend on, is it? We can go through a time of happiness in our own life. Swami tells the story, we were talking about it in the car yesterday with Vippa, where he was doing a tour across America, and he just some devotees got together and bought him a nice motorhome, and he was enjoying it so much. But then he realized, this is outward happiness. Something is going to happen the other way. And just then someone was parking the car and didn't do it properly, and it threw Swami backward. Swami was standing up and he fell back and he broke his finger. And he said he started laughing so hard because he realized this is the two scales of duality, the light and the dark, the happiness and outward things, which are always balanced by some disappointment, some little setback. And once we begin to accept this, then we begin the spiritual life, because we realize everything I was chasing after, in the end, there's always a counter effect. It never is stable for us. It doesn't bring me the happiness I was looking for. Then we begin asking, well, what is eternal? What is real? What will never shift? What will never disappoint me? And we begin looking for the inner realities. And we begin looking for the inner light. And Master talks so often, he speaks of, I believe it's in first chapter of autobiography, where he's a little boy meditating, and all of a sudden his room becomes filled with light. And he says, who are you? And he hears a voice from everywhere saying, I am Ishwara, I am light. And with all the longing of his heart, Master says, I want to be one with you. But then the light fades because it wasn't yet time for Master to dissolve the physical form. But in this, and then again, there's that beautiful, beautiful episode later in autobiography. If we only had one book, I think, to take with us through life, all we would need would be autobiography of a yogi, because every question on the spiritual path, every problem that humanity faces is answered in that. But so Master begins having this vision. He sees some newsreels. This was during the First World War, before he left for the West. And he sees the terrible battlefields and the suffering. He sees a newsreel at a cinema, and he's so upset in his heart to see all that suffering. And then he's meditating later in his room, and his body, his consciousness is transported to the body of a British ship captain, and the boat that this captain is managing, it's bombed, and the boat begins to sink. And the captain is that master was in his consciousness was in this body now of this British ship captain, and he makes it to the shore. He jumps off the boat, and he's oh, I survived, I survived. And then a bullet hits him in the chest, and he falls down dead. And he says, "Am I alive or am I dead?" And then he comes back to his body as Yogananda, and he's in his room in Calcutta. And he's so confused, and he asks God, "Who am I?" And then immediately he's transported back to the dead body of the ship captain. And he says again, "Lord, am I alive or dead?" And he hears the voice saying, "What does life and death have to do with light? The true light, the inner light." And he realizes, and then he awakens, and he realizes this was a deep blessing that he received to see that the light and shadow, life and death, it's all part of the duality. It's the superficial light. But underneath all of that is the true light. And whatever trials we have in life, I know this from my own experience. Remember to look through for no matter what happens. You lose everything you have, your house burns down, your dear ones pass away, you have trouble with the family, whatever it might be. Look beneath the outward forms and see God's light there, even in the worst of things. When Swamiji was a young monk, he started out, came to master, received discipleship, and trained by Yoganandaji. And then some years later, the organization, after master had passed, he was thrown out. It was very, very painful for him. And after some time, he returned to India, and he was able to have darshan with Ananda Ma. And he said, and she knew what had happened. And all she said was, "Guru's grace, Guru's grace." And he thought, how could this be Guru's grace? But he realized that if that split hadn't happened, he really would have not been able to fulfill his life dharma, start Ananda Sangha, let it bring people everywhere to Master's teachings and under his grace. So it's so important. Really, all of life's tests are simply for one reason, that we can see the light that shines in the darkness. Behind every trial is God's presence. Behind every sorrow is God's joy. Swami wrote a beautiful song, and part of the lyrics are, "Through all trials I sing thy name. Joy in thee is life's sole aim." And so in this festival of light, let's always remember to look for the light beyond the outward shifting patterns, to see the light in everyone, even the person that has treated you unkindly, has treated you unfairly. See the light in that person. There was a man who was always speaking ill of Swami, and he would just, whatever Swami did, he would criticize him publicly, criticize him privately. He was always criticizing him. And one day there was a big gathering, and this man came, And Swami he saw everyone in their highest. And he went right up to this man. And this man was a big man, much taller than Swamiji. And he went right up to him and he said, "You know, I could be the worst person in the world. I could be the devil incarnate, but it's not your problem. Why worry about it?" And this man was so surprised that he would be that way. He was saying, live in joy. Don't live in looking and criticizing other people. And the man, actually, he moved out of the area then, and we never heard from him again. But if Swami had confronted him and saying, "Why are you saying all these things against me?" he would have just built it up. But he just addressed the light in that man. And when we can forgive each other, when we can see the light in each other, it's such a victory. It's such a victory. And it's so important to forgive each other, accept each other. We were talking yesterday that what if you forgive someone, you've had a difficulty with another person, and you forgive them, but they don't forgive you, then what do you do? And of course, the lovely answer that someone said was, you can say to them, "I forgive you for not forgiving me." So we can always find the light. We can always bring it to the higher level. And even in the life's most difficult moments, if we can find a way to see God's joy shining there. Some of you know the story, but many years ago, 1976, in fact, Ananda was struck by a big forest fire, and the community was burnt to the ground. Nothing was left, just a few little shacks. And the house where Jyotish and I lived that Jyotish had built. It was a geodesic dome. It was burned to the ground. We had nothing left. And we had a new child, just a little 10-day-old baby. And so Jyotish had been up fighting, trying to fight the fire, trying to save the house. And these forest fires in California, I must say, the heat becomes so intense. It's hard to imagine. But we had a big cast iron wood stove, and it just melted. Just that intensity of the flame. We had a little a jar of coins, spare coins that we would save, melted. Just the coins, we saw a little pool of metal on the ground, but beautifully enough. And this was again God's light. For our wedding some years before, Swamiji had given us these two delicate little porcelain cups, little teacups and tea saucers. When we were going through the ashes, the stove was melted, the coin was melted, nothing was left. We found the little teacups. They were charred, but those, because they had a divine blessing in them. And that's a lesson. That's a lesson. If you look, it's very moving to say, but if you look through the ashes, even of life's losses, you will find that the blessings are always there. They remain, no matter what else you lose. And that's why we live a spiritual life, because we know that everything can be taken and will be taken. We know the inevitability. One day we will all die, as we will have nothing. It would just be little ashes to be thrown into the river, that's all. But what stays with us is the connectedness, the connection with God, the consciousness that we have been able to achieve, to attain, and the light that we have been able to bring into our being. And so in this season of light, in this festival of light, look for the real light. Don't look for the light that will come and go, but look for the light that shines in the darkness. Look for the light that is always there in every test and trial. Look for the light that shines even in the darkest person. That light is still there. We were speaking yesterday. It was very interesting to watch Swamiji because he would befriend people, strangers, that often were very unusual difficult people. You think, why is Swami befriending that person? But he was trying to awaken the light in them. He was trying to have at least some touch of light in this person's life, no matter how difficult they were. And once when Swami was in the hospital, he had very bad arthritic hips, and he had a hip replacement surgery, and we were wheeling him in the hospital in a wheelchair before he could come home. And he just wanted to spread light in that hospital. And at the far end of one hall, there was an old man sitting in the hallway that he was alone, and he was strapped into a wheelchair because he couldn't sit up straight. He would just fall over. And he was just, slumped over all by himself. And Swami said, "Oh, bring me over to him." So we wheeled him over to that man. And Swami you could feel he just was pouring light out. And he just said, "Good morning," with such energy of his heart and of his consciousness. And it was like the man awoke from a slumber, a dark slumber, and he just sat up and he opened his eyes, kind of blinking. He'd been in the dark for so long, dark of consciousness. And he looked at Swami and he said, sat up straight. He said, "Good morning." It was like a miracle, a little touch of light to a stranger. So in this season of light, give those you love, your presence, your nice new clothes, whatever it might be. But give love to the people that you don't know, the people that no one else loves, the people that you see have a loneliness in their heart or a pain in their heart, or someone that you have an alienation from. Use this time to give them light and love, because this is the season of light, and God's light is strong now. Be a channel for that light. Give it to all, forgive all, love all. This is the way of God and Guru. Sure. We'll take maybe a few minutes, and if you all have any questions, if not, we'll. But feel free if you have something you would like to ask us.
Yeah, I have a question.
Okay.
I was reading this book, and
That's a good book.
yes,
Yes, show others so that they can read it too.
It's the book of our blogs.
it's a wonderful book. So in the beginning itself, there's one place where it says that, you've written that you were practicing all the techniques, but there was something missing in that. So that's when you've written that I also tried to tune into the power of God's grace. That is what had been missing from my practices, and that ultimately enabled me to be free from that karmic burden. So, how do we do that? How do we tune into God's grace, even though we are practicing? But
Yeah. So in this blog that Mansi is referring to, I think it's the first one in the book too, that I wrote. I think Jyotish's was before. There was a person that I had a lot of difficulty with. I think it was an old karmic situation, and I could feel there wasn't harmony between us, and it caused me a lot of pain. I didn't want it to be that way, but it just was. And so I thought, well, what does my guru say? And so I prayed for this person. I did affirmations. I am free of any disharmony. I meditated and surrounded the person with light. I did everything I could. Nothing changed. And finally, this was many months. To be true, it was many years. But finally, I went to Swamiji. And I said, "Swami, I have tried everything I know, and I want to be free of this. I want to have harmony with this other person." And Swami said, he was so kind always. And he kind of patted me on the head and he said, it's very good what you're doing, but ultimately this transformation is a matter of God's grace. And so what he was saying, and this is Mansi's question, what does that mean? And so the missing element was when I was doing the practices, but I was doing them without a sense that I had to change. God, you need to change me. I'll do this and this and this and this, and then you need to change me. But it doesn't work that way. I had to be willing to open my heart and say, even if this person hurts me, even if something bad happens, God, I want to change. And it's mechanical techniques won't do it. And then the transformation began happening. And every time there would be disharmony, I would know, I'm not going to allow that because His power is what will change me. And if I shut it out, if I shut out the feeling that I know is the right attitude, I won't change. And so, in other words, we have to do the work. It's not enough just to do the techniques and say, okay, now it will happen. We have to do the work and we have to draw that grace and work cooperatively with it. And when we know we have the wrong attitude, then we say, I'm not going to do that. I can feel what you want me to do and I will do it. And then the change happens. And the change did happen. I don't want to not finish the story. The change did happen. And I can't say that this person and I are best of friends, but the karma's done. It's neutral. It's finished. And that's a great victory.
I don't know that I have much to add, so maybe we'll go on to the next question.
Why do we shut out the divine grace?
Why do
We shut out the divine grace.
Why do we shut out the divine grace? It's a very good question. The ego has its own momentum, one might say, because if you have had a habit pattern or a tendency for a long time, even though you want to change, you may not be able to change quickly. And so the ego tries to protect itself. The sense of separation tries to protect itself. And this is part of God's drama, part of God's play, that He created Maya to keep things in separation. Master said sometimes he used to argue with Divine Mother or the Heavenly Father, saying, you created me. I didn't get myself into this mess. You put me in this mess. It's up to you to get me out of this. And so, in fact, Master said that God likes it when we talk to him this way because it's familiar. It's the way we would talk to our own mother or our own father, you know. And so, so there's a tendency, you know, of Maya, the great Maya, but we hold on to little parts of that. And as with Devi, you know, this tendency with this person was an old tendency. It may be that it went back many lifetimes where they were had made difficulty for each other for many lifetimes. And maybe God withheld her changing until she was able to keep saying, I want to change this situation, I want to, and drive it deep enough into the subconscious so it eradicated all the roots of this karma and it didn't come up again. So why do we resist change? Why do we shut God out? It's partly karma, it's partly that the ego wants to maintain itself, and it's partly that we haven't yet had a deep enough experience. You know, we know that the spiritual path is true, but it's still to to a certain extent, it's affirmation. It isn't experience. Ananda Ma said that once you have the experience, all your doubts vanish. But up until that time, everyone has some doubts about this. So when you have the experience of God's presence, then that tendency to shut him out disappears.
I have read somewhere the Swamiji said, mentioned it, that if somebody is trying pushing you towards negativity, uh, try to keep away that negativity, de-link with that.
Mhm.
So, but you're saying bring harmony with that. So, how are these two things
Okay,
come
good
to?
question.
Well, I'll start. With this person that Devi was having disharmony with, she did most of the work interiorly. She didn't try to go and have a nice talk with this person because she knew that they would somehow, one or the other of them would say something that would awaken disharmony again. So it was from a distance. But from a distance, she said, she did the interior work. And who knows whether this other person involved was doing that too. It actually, for Devi, it didn't matter so much. It was herself that she was trying to cure of this. So very often, until if the I don't know, the disharmony is strong enough, it's better to stay away from that person. Once you get centered in yourself, then it's better to be with that person, not to confront, but just because um, because it will help change the whole pattern. And I'll say in a broad way that if you're having trouble with somebody, let's say somebody at work, Devi just wrote a blog that came out and she was praying. There was somebody who was doing something that was causing pain to other people. And several different people had written us about this person. And Devi thought, what should I do? She was praying to Master, should I write that person? Should I call them? Should I tell them that they have to change their ways? But then she said, what should I do? Master, is there an action item here? And came back very clearly. Master said, there's no action item, there's only a reaction item. And so as long as you're in a reactive mode, it's better to stay away and keep a little distance. But if you can get yourself centered so that you're not reactive, then coming together can be healing.
Yeah, when even you say stay away from negative situations, most negative situations are within families itself. Then what do you do? Father and son, mother and daughter, husband and wife. You can't stay
I
away.
can answer.
Okay, I'll just say Davey's going to give the long answer, but I'm going to give a short answer first. Stop poking at the situation. Don't you start any of that negativity.
But I think the main thing is, because of course this is true, it's, the man or woman at work, at least you can go home at the end of the day. But when it's always in your family, that's when it's difficult. But I think that's why the spiritual life is so important, because if we can stay centered in our own light, in the life of the wife of Ramakrishna, Sharda Devi, after he passed, she went and lived for some time in her family, in her village. And she took care, she had a niece that she took care of who was mentally insane and difficult and violent. And then there was another family member that was also difficult. But I think she was trying to create a model for us. If you're centered in God, you can deal with even the most difficult people. And so it really comes back to our own ability to remain centered, remain objective, to through daily practice of meditation, we find that place within ourself that is not involved, that is detached. The restful, Master called it the watchful state. And so, as long as we get caught up into it, it causes us suffering. But if we can, through meditation, develop within ourselves that place where we are, it's hard to describe the word of what it is, but you can say the impersonal place, the watchful place, the detached place. But it's where our soul knows that this world, all the light and shadow, all the dramas, they're not the ultimate reality. Master would take his disciples from time to time to the cinema, and they would be sitting there, and though his disciples tell the story that they'd be watching maybe a very engrossing movie, and just when the hero and the villain were just about to come to conflict, and it was the culmination of the whole movie, Master would tap them on the shoulder, and he'd point up to the beam coming from the projection booth, and he would say, just a play of light and shadow. It's all light and shadow. And that's what the great ones are trying to remind us. It's just light and shadow. Look to the source of the light, not to the drama that's being played out in your home or at work. Is it easy? No, it's not easy. But God gave you that test because you have the strength to deal with it. We have to develop that strength now.
I'll just add very briefly that why would God put us in a situation where it's painful and disharmonious, but that there's no realistic escape from that? It's not like you can run away from your children or run away from your husband or wife or father or mother. I mean, you can try that for a little while, but you just carry the problem with you. So why would God put us in a situation that's painful like that, where there's no escape? I think it's because we have to affirm so strongly in ourselves, I do not want to live in disharmony, that it gets down to the root of our subconscious tensions. That's why I felt badly. It was a little too quick of an answer. We have to get to the point where first we don't want to initiate. We're so sick of disharmony that we don't want to initiate it. And then finally we get to the point where we're so sick of it that whether somebody else initiates it or not, we don't want to react inside of ourselves to it. And so remember in Sri Yukteswar's training of Master, he would criticize him for every little thing. He said one time that he was walking and his toe brought up a carpet like that. And Sri Yukteswar said, look how clumsy he is in public. Look how clumsy he is. He can't even walk without turning up a carpet. And Master knew that kind of criticism was unfair. But he got to the point where Sri Yukteswar knew that in the future Master was going to come to America, where he would be criticized for many, many things and be in many, many unpleasant situations. And he was just getting him ready for that. So these difficult situations that we live in, and they're very painful often, they're getting us to the point where we just don't want to have disharmony. And we can't always run away from the world. We can't run away from these situations. So we just have to face them until our part in them is completely burned out. And then we'll be free of them forever.
And one last thing, and then I think we'll go on to our RT, just in response to this question, because it's something we all can relate to. When we, to finish the story about Sri Yukteswar and Master, when Master stopped resisting Sri Yukteswar's criticism, when he said his ego was fine with whatever happened, Sri Yukteswar stopped criticizing him. So I remember in our own life, we were having a family difficulty, and it was causing me a great deal of worry, concern, anxiety. And then finally, I realized I'm losing my peace of mind over this situation. And whatever happens here, I don't want to lose my peace of mind. What the karma that is in play here will play itself out, but my peace of mind is something I can control. I can't control the other thing. As soon as I switched my focus and began realizing I can't control what's outside of me, but I can control my own mental state of consciousness, the situation totally changed and I didn't have to worry him. It righted itself. So we hold in place by our own fears and anxieties these negative situations too. Not always, it's not guaranteed, but it certainly helps. So remember that too.